why is this the standout track before Michael and I start talking? Why do you think this is the standout track?
I think it's so optimistic. This song gets me hyped, guys. Like beyond hyped.
Yes.
It's one of those songs that every time I hear, like, I swear I can almost feel my pupils like focus, and you feel your heartbeat in your chest. Like, it just the fact that it's about him almost being in that deadly car crash, and being saved by a piece of technology. The rest of the album is pretty negative on technology, but this saved him. So again, he's like, okay, like there's some good things about it. But I had a sibling who died in a car crash, and I think this song just resonates with me, and the feeling that every day you do come back and you are back to save the universe, whatever that means to you. So I just get beyond hype listening to it.
I love that it's optimistic to you. That's literally, I think I hadn't really thought about it in that way, but there is a hope. There's a hope to it.
It has arguably the most optimistic lyric of any Radiohead song, I think. In an interstellar burst, I am back to save the universe. I mean, come on. Like, when does Tom York speak that optimistically?
That's as close as like Tom and Lizzo ever get, you know, like.
Yes. The Airbag. All right. So this is a well-made point for why it stands out. I'm going to give you 10,000 points for Airbag being the intersection of Lizzo and Tom York, though.
Love it.
First off, weirdest bass line of all time, right? There's no, like, Colin Greenwood has the weirdest job ever as the bassist for a rock band.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%.
I remember thinking that pretty early on, listening to that song. I'm like, it's so disjointed and there's no continuity to it. But now listening to it, it almost sounds like these instruments are speaking to one another, like they're speaking in languages that we can't understand, which is rad. And also, I think it continues throughout the album. What about you, Michael? Where does this one fall for you in your experiencing this album now?
I mean, this is right up there. I mean, I believe when we went on the Your Nerdy Obsession podcast and we were asked to choose one song that if we could only listen to one Radiohead song, like for the rest of our lives on a desert island, what would it be? And this was the one I chose, actually, because it was, I think, like, OK Computer was a difficult listen for me at first, but this song always resonated with me because it feels like, it's like just like an epic album opener. I don't understand what's going on with the instruments. And it also, like, it seems like it should be this sort of repetitive song that would, like, get tired after a while. But there's just, I mean, like, Radiohead does a good bridge. Like, you never know what's going to happen when it gets to the bridge. And I just think sonically there's something really awesome. And I mean that in the real meaning of that word going on in this song. It's one of the greatest album openers for me.
What do you feel about Radiohead and happiness? I feel like they wrestle with, like with ideas of like happiness and how we should feel it, how we do feel it on a day-to-day basis. Where do you think the happiness or the joy is in this album, if there is any?
I think there's a lot in accepting yourself is their main source. You mentioned when you did in Rainbows, Tyler, on your first episode that, like, they are about everybody's weird and that's more than okay. And I get the same message here. Like, when I listen to Fitter Happier, it's almost like a little prayer or mantra of, like, forget, like, if you have something that's wrong with you or that you should be doing better, like, forget about it. Just accept yourself and accept that that's part of you, and love yourself for it, because it's what makes you human.
I feel like they'd be pretty pleased that's what you're taking from this, because I think that's a way more generous read on it than many casual observers would give. Not that you're by any means a casual observer or a casual listener. We can talk Fitter Happier for a minute. I mean, a prayer or a mantra. The first time anyone I feel has ever said that song made them feel like it was something they wanted to repeat to themselves over and over again. What do you remember how Fitter Happier hit you when you first listened to it?
I started dying laughing. Like, I have a dark sense of humor. I just thought it was so funny.
For those of you, we're not going to play Fitter Happier right now, but for those of you listeners who haven't heard it, it's sort of a robotic voice that is very matter of factly stating. I don't know, how would you two describe it? It's matter of factly stating a list of ailments, kind of, or like a way of choosing to be, like things to aspire to, kind of. What would you say?
Yeah, like a checklist for like a well-adjusted adult.
Mm-hmm.
I read on like a fan website that it was like a checklist for how to be a 90s person. Like, that was really funny.
I mean, that scans. It feels to me like it's, checklist for how to be like a corporate capitalist, successful person in the Western world. But also, like, I don't know, we had a guest on who asked us if when we talk about the no skips thing on albums, and it's Ashlyn. It's Ashlyn Lozano, everyone.
Hi, Ashlyn.
Hi, Ashlyn. It's she was like, really, you don't skip Fitter Happier? And I'm kind of like, when I'm listening to the album all the way through, no, I don't. It's like perfectly placed in the middle, like in the era of there being a side A and a side B. It kicks off side B, and it feels like you need it in the middle to sort of like take a breath and refocus. It's almost like a mission statement in some ways to me, in a weird backhanded way. Like it's being snarky about all the things on the list, but you got to listen to it a little bit to figure that out.
I also think it builds towards the last line being a pig in a cage on antibiotics, like that. I'm always anticipating that line, so I never skip it because I know it's relatively short, and I'm like, that line always, that it's sort of it disgusts me in a way, as I think it's supposed to, but in a very sort of satisfactory fashion.
I think nobody wants to live like the person in that song, right? Because you'd be so boring if that's how you thought about everything all the time. And my funny story is I've had 3 different coworkers try to convince me to get the like under the desk treadmill at work.
Oh yeah.
And I just send them that song. Like, I won't do it.
It's brutal. That is really brutal. And one of my friends has one of those, and he loves it, and he gets moving, but it would be really nice to just take a break and go outside, wouldn't it?
I did. This was not on my bingo card. I did not think we would talk about Fitter Happier today, but I'm so glad we did.
Yeah, I am too. As an entry point to the next thing, let's talk about standards for perfection, because I have a hunch. I just have a sneaking feeling that yours are going to be really good. So as we ask everybody, when we asked you to present the albums that you believed were perfect, what were the standards you were using to assess them? What was the rubric you were grading them against?
So my first is that it has to be a complete body of work in every detail. I forget the Wagner term, Michael, you've brought it up before, but
Gesamtkunstwerk.
Exactly. So First and foremost, and along with that, I want a story, or if not a story, at least like a strong theme throughout the whole album.
Okay.
It's got to have lyrics that I'll think about for days and days on end. I come for the lyrics, but I stay for the music and melody and things, and those grow on me with a perfect album.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, so you enter through the lyrics. And then so that must have been difficult. You said earlier how you couldn't understand the lyrics much. I couldn't either when I first started listening to it, but that means you put a little bit extra effort into understanding the lyrics from the very beginning.
Yeah, I think I always try to, and it's something like I always remember album lyrics. And so I think what really made me go like, oh, I got to check this album out again is like the line in No Surprises with a job that slowly kills you. I was just like, what else is in here? You know, like,
oh yeah, you get 1,000,000 points for a job that slowly kills you. That's there's so many lines that could be the thesis of the whole album in each song. Because in an Interstellar Burst, I'm back to save the universe could be the thesis of this whole piece, probably.
100%.
they're really good at coming up with those one-liners that you could talk about for days, right? Like those one-liners that like it's you think you get what they're saying, but like it could provoke so much discussion. Like we were saying before with the lyrics, it is tricky to understand him sometimes. The sort of poetry of the songs is not one that's always necessarily telling a narrative story. So you got to like listen for those little nuggets that sort of ring out clearly. And I think that, you're right. This album is full of them.
So when you listen to this album nowadays, having lived with it for many years, what is the way that you listen to it?
I'll either like pick out tracks, like I'm just in a mood to listen to like one or two tracks. But if I'm doing a whole listen, like I have the vinyl of it, so I'll just put it on and let it go.
It does bear a full listen through pretty well. It's only like an hour. It's less than an hour long.
Yeah, I would say they're like the last two tracks of like Lucky and Tourist. Like if I left the room, I wouldn't be super upset, but I wouldn't skip them. You know what I mean?
That's interesting you say that, because I was taking a walk re-listening before we logged on, and I was like, oh, maybe The Tourist is my standout track. Maybe I'll surprise everyone and I'll choose The Tourist.
So I've got a question that was not in the package that we sent you, but I'm just wondering, I mean, as you know, since you are clearly a devoted listener of the pod, we absolutely love Radiohead and we think they can do almost no wrong. But something that I think maybe Tyler and I struggle with often is, how do you convince the Radiohead haters of what the value is here? So is this an album that you would use to introduce to people to try and convince them of their genius, or are there specific things you would say, like, or I don't know, how would you handle that?
I would be very selective. Like I think I'd point them at more of the hits. Like No Surprises or Paranoid Android. Like you got to give like an intro but I don't know if I would tell a new Radiohead listener like just go straight through the whole album, because they're probably going to come back and be like, I don't get it.
I appreciate that, because typically what I've tried to do is tried to come at it from like, this one song I know you'll like, and I'll just hope that maybe it'll catch you enough that you'll be curious, and then you'll make the decision for yourself. Like the Myxomatosis from Hail to the Thief. If I know somebody's really into heavy shit, then I'll give them Myxomatosis and be like, see, they kind of go hard. They can go hard. Or if they want, or I'll do something like Nude. Nude is kind of like, it's almost like a ballad, and sometimes I like to share that one.
I could see that. Yeah. I think it's just like, if you sent like a new listener, like Climbing Up the Walls, like there's no way they're going to like that at first listen. I feel like, I don't know, maybe if they're real hardcore, but
yeah.
Have you ever heard the 07 remix of Climbing Up the Walls?
I have not.
You should give it a listen. It definitely is it's very 07-esque. I mean, it's smoothed out and it has sort of
you love
sheen
07.
to it. I do love 07, and I think that they do a good mix of that, or remix, or I don't know, whatever they say. I'm not a DJ. I don't know all the terms.
Brian, do you have a cover of Radiohead besides Radio Dread, the UB41 being like your day one Radiohead cover? Yeah. Is there another cover of Radiohead that you feel particularly connected to, or that you think is particularly effective?
Yeah, there's a Roman G. Arthur album called Okay Lady, which is songs off this album. And a lot of it's mixed with D'Angelo songs.
Oh, what? Really?
It's so good.
Why did I not know? I did not know this existed. Whoa. Okay. So it's every song from OK Computer mixed with some D'Angelo? How does it work?
It's not every song of OK Computer. It's some songs, and they'll do like the chorus is Radiohead, but like the verses are like a D'Angelo verse, and like the beat and melody is a little different, and there's backup singers, and it's an incredible little side album.
Oh shit. Okay. You just made my night.
I did not know that existed. I did not know. I thought for sure you were going to say clearly the baby lullaby version of Radiohead songs that exists on Spotify and all those things. Like, have you ever? Some of those are not like Radiohead lends itself well to music box instruments.
I can see that. If any of the three of us have children, then I'm sure that will be on the Bluetooth speaker in the nursery.
Oh yeah.
Fitter, happier.
Yeah, fitter, happier. Just start them early, like a little drip of radio.
Wait, but what would that be with fitter, happier? What would the voice be? Would it be like sort of like an Elmo type voice saying that? Because
no, fuck.
That's nightmare.
But I think that sort of accomplishes what Radiohead's like going for with that. Like having now I want, hello, dear listeners, if any of you out there can do a good Elmo voice, we need a recording of Elmo covering Fitter Happier. Or I need it. They don't need it. I need it.
Just Michael, store that one away for nightmare fuel.
Yeah.
Because I will also say that sometimes sharing covers of Radiohead songs has been an effective way for me to introduce a skeptic. You have any number of creep covers on YouTube, obviously. And then there's a few really terrible Radiohead covers. But you know who I think does a really good one of No Surprises is Regina Spektor. I think hers is quite an effective cover.
I could imagine that being really quality.
I'll throw that in the episode description. Brian, do you have a favorite member of the band? If they were the Beatles, we would say, do you have a favorite Beatle? But we can't really do that with Radiohead. So do you have a favorite Radiohead member?
Yeah, it's definitely Johnny Greenwood for me. Because same. There's so much I don't understand about what he does and how his mind works. And I'm like so fascinated by his influence from Penderecki, and he's in his scores and things he's composed. He says he looks like him at like a drum machine, which appeals to the drummer in me, but then the voices are like orchestral, and I think it's just such a unique and genius combination, and I think he should make as many scores as Hollywood will let him.
Agreed. You will find no argument from me. I don't know, Michael. Do you argue with that?
No, I don't. I mean, like, and some of his collaborations. I remember when we talked about the Frank Ocean album, and we discovered that he contributed to, I think, the track Siegfried on Blonde, which was our guest Kashia standout track. Hi, Kashia. He just brings magic to whatever he scores.
He's sort of the most otherworldly of them in some ways.
Yeah, and I think I really have an admiration for this like quiet genius type. Like George is my favorite Beatle, and the Beatles for the same reason.
Same here.
It feels like so much of the musicality innovation comes from those two in each group.
Did you watch the Beatles documentary?
I did. I had food poisoning, and it was like a weird 10-hour fever dream of a great day.
It sounds like the perfect way to watch it.
Yeah.
You get 60,000 points for watching it in that way.
My fiance had walked in the room, and she was like, "This is so boring, and I've only been here for 5 minutes."
And you're like, I'm in another place. I'm sorry.
We're coming on hour 8 here. So
it felt almost like Lars von Trier makes a Beatles documentary. It was like that long. I just wanted to like claw my eyes. I mean, I learned a lot about, how they worked as a band, and I think that came from it being so long. I sometimes in my theater classes, I talk a lot about duration and how we're so used to things existing in like little easy to digest pockets, and sometimes the artistic experience is about experiencing things in long form, because the duration of the experience is part of it. You wouldn't have the same experience if it were chopped up into little bits. But I also agree it was too long.
But there's also an element of us wanting to have all of that. Maybe, Peter Jackson says, "Hey, we have all this stuff. Let me package it up in the way that's most comprehensive, and you can just have it and do what you will with it." Is it better to have it than to not have it? Maybe.
Yeah, and one of the things I really loved about it is I think like you guys know as musicians, like practicing music and getting very good at music is kind of a boring process. Like
Mhm.
it's very tedious and you're doing the same thing over and over again. And like I like that they showed that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And no one wants to listen to it while you're practicing.
No. They said that thing about George too, where I think it was either in this Beatles doc, or I also watched that 8 Days a Week Beatles documentary about their touring years. And Paul makes some comment about how George was, I'm paraphrasing here, but he goes, George was over there writing some really nice little songs. So he kind of knew, it feels like they kind of knew that there was something happening over there that they weren't quite involved with, that was just sort of self-started. And obviously his voice contributing to their work as a band, it's indispensable. But he always did have that sort of mystique. It sounds like even to Paul and John, which is great. I very much appreciate that.
I find Paul so condescending after that documentary. Oh my God. Justice for George after that documentary.
He got his.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to do something a little bit different, Brian. Typically we only, as you know, as a dear friend of the pod, Michael and I jointly choose a standout track from the album to go along with our guests. But considering this is also one of our nearest and dearest albums, we decided we couldn't choose just one. So we each chose a standout track. And we're going to listen to Michael's now. Michael, what did you choose?
Well, I chose, though it is not my favorite track from the album. I mean, it's hard to pick one song off this album. But I chose. I mean, my Airbag is one of my favorites. Subterranean Homesick Alien is also one of my favorites, and I talk about that on the other podcast we went on. But I decided to go with the lead-off single, which is Paranoid Android, because I think that if you're looking for a track that I think encapsulates everything that's happening on this album in terms of music, like, because it just changes like 2 or 3 times during the songs. You hear a few different styles. Lyrically, it's got that sort of those like little one-liner punches going on. It also feels like there's sort of an anti-capitalist theme running throughout it. It's got a bonkers music video that goes along with it. So I just think we need to listen to Paranoid Android.
Well, you know what? I say we do. Everyone, this is Paranoid Android by Radiohead.